In this video, I'll be executing an Ansible playbook directly from AWX against a Juniper VSRX device. We'll be checking things like our memory, storage, whether we have any system alarms. In doing this, we'll validate that the various components of our automation stack work as expected. In AWX, templates equate playbooks. In other words, before we can execute an Ansible playbook, we need to create a template. So let's look at what is required to create a template. Then we can work our way back in ensuring that we have all of those things in place. Then we can create and execute our template, which equates our Ansible playbook. So we go to templates, add. In this case, we are adding a job template. In our next video, we'll look at a workflow template. We need to provide a name, a description, the job type which will be run because we are executing this playbook, and we are executing the playbook against a device. That device should be part of an inventory. So we'll select which inventory that device will be part of. The playbook that would execute sits on GitHub. Within GitHub, it is part of a repository. Recall again, in AWX, projects equate repositories in GitHub. So we need to indicate which project that our playbook is part of. Then we have execution environment. The same logic when we're looking at netbox integration. To execute these playbooks against our Juniper devices, some Juniper collections or packages will be needed. So we need a container that has all of these packages and collections. We call that the execution environment. Once we have the right projects selected, or once we have the right GitHub repository selected, we are able to select the specific playbooks within that repository. Then, AWX, to execute these playbooks, would need some form of reachability to our network device. In this case, it would need netconf reachability. To have this reachability, it would need some credentials, like a username and password. So you have to indicate which credentials that AWX would use to execute this job template against our network devices. So now we know what we require before we can create a playbook. We need a project, we need a device which will update netbox with, then we would need an execution environment, we need a credential, then we can create our playbook. So let's get started. Let's look at the first thing we need, which is project. We already have the inventory because in one of our episodes, we added the integration between netbox and AWX. So let's look at project. So in project, we go to add, we'll give this a name, and we'll call this automation script. We can give a description. We select our organization, Velox Bank. We don't need an execution environment. The source control type, this is Git. Then we have to indicate the details of our Git repo. We first add the URL. So this is our repository called script. Then we pick this URL. We put it right here. We are working from our main branch. Then we need to authenticate to Git because this is a private repository, as you see here. So I select my GitHub credential, which I added during the AWX GitHub integration video. I save. At this point, AWX will attempt syncing with GitHub. What we want to see is that this was successful. In other words, AWX is able to pull the playbooks that we have within our Git repository. So the first step is done. We've created our project. We need a device so that we can update netbox with this. Next step. In this video, I'm using Juniper VLabs. Juniper VLabs allows us to create different kinds of topologies. These are basically sandboxes. They are very simple ones. So we can have a standalone VMX device, a standalone VSRX, which would we use today. We can have more detailed topologies like this Junos Day 1 Plus experience. Then we can have, some routing topologies and all of that. So in keeping with making this as beginner friendly as possible, we just have a standalone VSRX device here. Now, we need to update Netbox with the IP address of this device. The IP is 66.129.235.201. The netconf port that is being used on this device is 47001. We need to take note of that because this is not the regular or default netconf port of 830. So we need to instruct AWX at a point that if you are connecting to this device via netconf, use this port 47001 instead of the default 830. So let's update Netbox with the IP address of our device. So if you go to devices in Netbox, our interest is in the Accra DC VPN gateway, which is our VSRX device or our SRX device. The current IP is 10.11.11.100/32. So we change that. We go to IPAM, then IP addresses. We change this to 66.129.235.201. Before we save this, if we go to AWX and look at our host, we can see this VPN gateway. Its IP is 10.11.11.100, what we saw there before. Now, we have a schedule created that refreshes our dynamic inventory every 2 minutes. So what we'll do is that once we go here, where's Netbox? Here, and save, we expect that after 2 minutes, this will take effect within our centralized controller, which is AWX. So if you go here, it is still this. When we wait a couple of seconds or minutes, we should see this updated. So that would be our second step that we need to do. First step, we create a project, which we've done. Second step, we have our VSRX device. We've updated Netbox with this device, and we expect that this shows within AWX after some minutes. Okay, so we refresh it right here. Then we have our new IP address of 66.129.235.201. So next step, we would need an execution environment. For purposes of this video, I'll be using an execution environment which I've already pushed to GitHub. I'll do a standalone video that explains how to actually create an execution environment from scratch. So let's go here, then execution environment. We call this Junos execution environment. We add the path to the image or the container. Then my container is not that big, so I would always put before running, but you can only pull the image if it is not present. Typically, if your container is big, you'd want that so that your playbooks can execute as fast as you want. We can give a description, organization, Velox Bank. We don't need a registry credential because this container is public. So we save. Third step out of the way, we have our execution environment. Fourth step, we need to create a credential that allows AWX to execute our playbooks against our VSRX device over netconf. So credentials, we call this network devices. You can give a description, then we select our organization as Velox Bank. Credential type, you have to select network because this is for our network devices. Now, if we look at our VSRX device here, and we do an SSH to it, and we look at the configuration, let's grep for user. We have this user, AWX, with a password. This is the user that would be using to execute the playbooks against this device. And also, we have netconf being allowed, as you can see here. So let's go back to AWX. Username is AWX as we saw. The password is the password we configured on the VSRX. So I save. Now, if we go back to our templates and add a template, let's look if we fulfilled all the requirements. A name, description, job type, we have our inventory, we have a project, we have an execution environment. Because we have the project, we should be able to select the playbook. Then we have the credential. It looks like we are good. So within our scripts repository, we have a number of playbooks. Let's start with resources. Resources, what it will do, very simple. It will use this Juniper collection and it will check the system memory, system storage, and it would print this out for us. So let's do that. We call this resources. We can give it a description. Inventory would say our netbox inventory. Project, the automation script project we added. Execution environment, the Junos execution environment we added. Now, because we've been able to sync to this project, playbooks, we see all the playbooks that are available within this repository. So if you go back here, we see this. That is what we are seeing here because we're able to sync between AWX and GitHub. So resources, credentials, we select network, the network devices. Now, it looks like we are good, but recall that our device here listens for netconf connections on 47001, not 830. So we need to tell AWX that use the Ansible port 47001. Then within our inventory, we have a number of devices. Typically, you would have a number of devices within your inventory. These devices are grouped based on how they are structured in Netbox. Our Ansible playbook had host as all. So if we decide to just leave it at this point, it will attempt to execute this playbook against all the devices that AWS pulled from Netbox. That is not what we want. We want to limit this to our VPN device or probably to specific devices. So we would use this limit option. We can put the device here, or we say, okay, prompt us on launch so that we can add this device. So we save. Then we launch this template, which is this playbook. Then we say, okay, run this against Accra, DC, VPN gateway. You don't always need to add the specific device name. Now, if within Netbox, for example, all your VSRX devices were part of a group called, let's say, VSRX, we can use that group name here and it would execute this playbook against all devices in that group. Or if we have devices in a particular site and within Netbox, we group devices by site, we can use that here to execute our playbook. So next, we launch. At this time, AWX is pulling our container image, which we are using as our execution environment. So it pulls that and it will execute this playbook. It says that we were successful. If you click on the specific task here, we can see the details of the execution. So this task shows system memory. We use this module. That is why we needed that execution environment to begin with. And if you look at our JSON output, we have the memory printed. Then we can see this in YAML format also. And we have the output. Now, we can do same for our show system storage. In this playbook, we also printed the output, but it's not compulsory to print that. As you see, we can check these same details within the specific task executions. Now you can relaunch this job, basically re-execute it. Then when we go to jobs, we can see all our job executions. This will include those that are successful and those that were not. The 362 is a dynamic inventory sync. So let's add another template. Job template. We call this system alarms. Description, job type, run, inventory, netbox, project. We select automation script, execution environment, user Junos execution environment, playbook, we select system alarms. So if you come back to our playbooks right here, system alarms, what we are doing, simply show system alarms, just that, and we print this out. So credentials, we select our machine credential, we add it, then we add our Ansible port. Then limit, we prompt this on launch. We save, we launch this. Then we have the active alarms that we have on our device. We go to jobs and we see all the playbooks that we've executed. Now let's try something else. Now when we come to host, we see that this VPN gateway is part of a number of groups: Juniper SRX Days, VB Accra DC, Velox Bank, VPN Gateway. So if we had a number of VSRXs, which were all VPN gateways and as such part of this group, and our intent was to execute this workflow against all our VPN gateways, instead of using the specific device name, we can use the group. So we come back to templates. We select, let's say, system alarms right here. We launch and we can use VPN gateway. So we're able to execute this, and it executed against our Accra DC VPN gateway. The point I'm making here is that you are able to execute a job against a number of devices that are part of the same group. That is why it is very important to structure your netbox as efficiently as possible. So what if your intent was to execute a number of templates in succession based on a particular logic? So for example, at this point, we have two templates. So let's say you want to execute system alarm, and if it passes, you automatically go on and execute resources. This sounds like a workflow. In our next video, we look at how to add a workflow template, which allows us to stitch multiple job templates together. If you find this helpful or interesting, kindly hit like and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.